All right, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Sport Management Club at IUPUI's virtual speaker series. Tonight, we've got a very special guest coming to us from all the way to Atlanta, Georgia. He's a vice president of marketing with the Atlanta Hawks. This is Rob Laycock. Rob, how are you today?
I'm great. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. How you doing?
Excellent. I'm doing very well. We appreciate everybody that's here so far. I'm looking forward to hopefully more coming in to tonight's episode. Don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A. We will get to those shortly. But first, I want to Rob, go ahead and introduce yourself. You know, I've given the title out, but talk about your background a little bit and what types of things you've done and how you got to where you are and things like that.
Sure. I was born in Indianapolis, grew up in Brownsburg, graduated from Brownsburg High School. I knew in 1987 I wanted to go to IU because of Steve Alford. Not as relevant of a name now, but in IU, I started working at IndyCar. And you and I were just talking about Chris Denari and working in fourth turn. I spent about 10 years as a pit reporter, notes and quotes, writing stories, that sort of thing. And that got me into a lot of the world that you have been into. And it got me connected with the Indiana Pacers when I was in grad school, interned there. Luckily, the person that I was interning for left for a better job, and then it was Reggie Miller's last playoff run. So I got to get my feet wet there for those couple months, and the job was open, and I applied for it and got it. And didn't expect it, but it's been a decade with the Pacers, and had a great little run there.
So talk about your time in the Kelly School of Business. I did my research. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about your time in Kelly. What types of things did you do as a student that allowed you to kind of get to doing what you've been doing?
Yeah, whether it was undergrad or grad, because I got my MBA there as well. Two big people that helped me a lot were Tim Baldwin and Tom Bowers. I know Tom recently retired. Tim's still there. But they had a great relationship with Quinn Buckner. Quinn was the VP of communications at the Pacers at the time. He's still there and got the connection there for the internship. And so while there, I was very committed to that sports and entertainment academy. That academy is no longer there, but things like this are what I participated in, and I got lucky, met somebody, and got an opportunity.
So during your time, that one thing, did you do anything with athletics? Did you do anything with other organizations in town?
Sure.
Did you volunteer, things like that?
Yeah, it's weird to go back to those memories because they, months ago feel like years ago. 2003 is when I graduated. It certainly feels a long time ago. A couple things I did. I worked the parking lot selling parking for football games. The same people that kind of managed every element of it. So that was a networking play for me that also paid $7 an hour or whatever it was at that time. And so I did probably 10 of those types of things. Some of them were pointless. Some of them worked out.
You may have been there when I was in there, to be honest with you. I was working in the ticket office from 2000 until 2005. So
correct.
I was doing my PhD. So that's pretty awesome. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit about, obviously you talked a little bit about networking. Your instructors knew Quinn Buckner. What other things do you see as important for students today to do to get into maybe not your position right away, but to kind of climb their way up the ladder?
Yeah, I mean, networking has certainly evolved. It's a lot easier to get in front of people. Then the tough part was finding the one person, and establishing that relationship was a bit easier then. In my case, every semester I know when papers are due because I get about 100 messages on LinkedIn saying, hey, can I interview you? I got something due tomorrow. And really the best ones that reach out to me at LinkedIn tend to get in front of that wave of people, because I like to respond to everybody the best I can. Kyle and I connected on LinkedIn. But it's tough when you have so many because it becomes a chore. And so I do still think a traditional element of LinkedIn is that way. Another traditional element that people don't do as much is kind of the Indiana Sports Corps volunteering. That I did that in undergrad a little bit. And it wasn't like it led to a job, but I learned who the people were in Indianapolis. And Indy is like Atlanta. The same people that were running things in Indy when I was coming up are really the same people now. If you look at those organizations, the ownership of teams, I know ownership of the Speedway recently changed, but even the Speedway has a lot of the same people. That's true in Atlanta here. And so meeting them, they don't remember me now that I used to work there, but I got to learn their personalities a bit. So when I reached out to them, back then I might have been emailed. Some people reach out to me through Instagram, funny enough. They have done their research a little bit more. It resonates. I had done my research and it resonated when I reached out.
So when you were working with ISC, what types of events did you do with ISC back in your undergrad days?
Gosh, I wasn't expecting to prepare this World Championships in 2002. If you remember that,
Yep.
that was pretty cool. Like ISC was involved with everything, still is. So like some of those elements I probably took for granted, but a lot of events at the field house. I knew Bill York before then, but Bill York, I'm sure you know Bill. Bill helped me a lot in media rooms that you were in, just being a paper runner. My first job at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I was shocked. I took a piece of paper from the media center and ran it over to the pagoda. And I was like, can we not email it? Can we not fax it? Can we not anything it? But no, I was just running a piece of paper.
So you were trying to be innovative before it was innovative.
No, like it wasn't innovative at all. But like it was the fact of the matter was they needed it there so fast. It was just better to depend on that than depend on a Wi-Fi network that had 300,000 people in the building. So, looking back, I was wrong. But, those types of things are a waste of time until they pay off. And I did a lot of those wasted times, and a couple of them paid off.
So were you were here for you've served on a couple of committees in town when you were working with the Pacers. Talk a little bit about that experience with the Super Bowl. I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you were part of the Super Bowl Village Committee, if I recall correctly, or something of that nature.
Correct. Yeah. So the nice thing about Indy and Atlanta is very similar. Indy has that hospitality where when you get into that mix, opportunity can come about. So, working at the Pacers, Rick Fuson still there, the president, Jim Morris was there as well. And so they gave me that opportunity because I worked hard for the Pacers. And, that's a big opportunity that anybody in MIC would have wanted. So being able to be part of a huge event, something that all of us remember that we're a part of it, whether you attended as a fan, went downtown or otherwise, that was huge. I didn't do as much as many people on the committee did because I was just part of one small segment of it. So when I talk about that, I make sure there's hundreds of people that did way more than me, but I got a chance to have some interactive opportunities on Georgia Street that really were about email collection, texting collection, getting people to know where to go, that sort of thing. That seems kind of archaic now, but at the time was a big deal.
So you were doing kind of like the data user feedback type stuff?
A little bit.
About
so if you walked from the field house all the way to the end of Georgia Street, there was these little kiosks that were there that you get your photo taken in. And so I didn't expect it to be that successful because everyone assumed it would have been in like Dallas the year before where we'd have a lot of snow. But I'm sure you remember that week was 60-degree week. And so like my purpose was
it was amazing. It was an amazing week.
Correct. And really that, we call it fan acquisition of getting people into that Super Bowl database. So then they were aware of what was going on. Mobile apps weren't really as heavy of a thing then. Mobile web wasn't as nice as it is now. You didn't lean on social as much as you do now to communicate what's going on. So in that capacity, we were giving a fan interactive moment of capturing a selfie photo on an interactive kiosk to get your information to then let you know of other things that were going on those days. Because our assumption was you wouldn't be walking around to find out about it. You'd have to walk down, you'd have to get email to find out what was going on that day because we didn't expect to have the weather we did.
So being that we had the weather that we did that double the workload? Did that make it way beyond what you guys expected?
It probably tripled the IT issues,
I should have known you'd bring up IT in this one, right?
Yeah, so I did not expect to have that. And plus, like you can only account for so much alcohol, and so in the 60 degrees, a lot of people were drinking a bit more in Georgia than they would have otherwise.
That's a very fair point.
Those types of things are difficult to predict.
So with what you were doing on Georgia Street, how did that kind of meld into what was happening within the city? So obviously Georgia Street was one of the attractions, but
sure.
With what was happening within the city, you had, the Hampton Inn set up as the Bud Light Hotel and all the big tent in the back, the back parking lot of that and all the events that were happening there. How did you intertwine all of that stuff or your team kind of intertwine all that stuff?
In the grand scheme of things, it was a small element of a huge event, but all of those small elements had to really work well. So like I forgot about the Bud Light party there. That was a huge undertaking. That was way more than anything I did. They literally reskinned an entire hotel and made it a key spot of Super Bowl week. So we were just a stop along the way to keep the motion of fans going left and right because we also didn't really know then how fans would walk up and down that street because it was brand new to Indy. So now everything looking back, we were naive because we didn't have any type of experience or feedback. So the events that Indy has put on since have been even better in Georgia because now we know the flow of traffic and those sort of things, and you know where to place things.
Well, building that road, Georgia it didn't exist, right? So,
That's right.
Now that there's that road there, that actually adds to the flow, and now you can actually plan around that flow, right? So having that ability, that kind of changes things for now. So I also saw that you did some work with the Big Ten tournaments on their, whether it be the Big Ten championship or the Big Ten, basketball tournaments. What was your role with the LOC there?
Yeah, so we launched the Big Ten Career Expo. And so you had all these schools coming in, whether alumni or students or otherwise. And while in Indy, you have plenty to do. One of the things we wanted to have was give an opportunity to get a job in sports and entertainment, whether it's internship or full time. And so we would have a few hundred people stop by Union Station, had some great speakers there. It's kind of a classic career expo at that time, but we had the ability to work with the schools to promote to their alumni base and their students that were coming into Indy. And then it was at the time when Indy was working very hard to land the Big Ten tournaments to continually have Indianapolis as the spot. That was one element in the pitch that differentiated Indianapolis from Chicago at the time. It's like, look, we also want to have a long-term impact and not just a great weekend in Indianapolis.
So you kind of worked your way up, you said, through the Pacers organization. So all of these things on the side obviously were networking. They were, experiences that you could have, but you worked your way through the Pacers organization to a vice presidentship, right? That's not an easy task. So during that time, how did those other roles impact, I guess you could say, your upward mobility, do you think?
Yeah, effectively that job at the Pacers was my first full-time job. And so you only know what you experience when it comes down to it. So having the Super Bowl committee, there's a lot of great talent top to bottom on that. Big Ten, same thing. And it's not just Indy talent. There's people coming in from across the nation to work on that. So that exposed me to a lot that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And then I could have transferred and apply to my job at the Pacers and vice versa. And so, it helped me become more experienced, more mature, all those types of things that you want, and widen my network to people I would have never had a chance to meet. And
so who were some of those people?
This day.
Who were some of those people?
Literally everybody at every sports team in Indy, Big Ten, every school from that standpoint. And then Super Bowl, you're talking about the committee that really, some of those people came into town from other cities and other states that have worked on other committees, or just people that I knew in Indy that I never had a chance to work for, the sports corps being a main one of that.
So now you talk about your role when you were at the Pacers, right? You were in charge of, from looking at the title, you were in your description, there were a lot of roles that you had to play. Can you kind of talk about your job responsibilities there a little bit, and what were the biggest elements of that?
Yeah, my last few years at the Pacers, I was the VP of marketing, where I really had established myself with my coworkers and teammates. We worked very hard to integrate digital, which was a big deal back then, and then integrate that with traditional, which is also a big deal. That's kind of something you kind of take for granted for anybody in my role now. But at the time, those were two different key areas because digital wasn't making any money and traditional still did. Digital obviously expanded to social in my final few years there, where social was no longer just a PR tool, but a brand building opportunity. And so that's really kind of where my key focuses are. Where I was most successful individually is that I have been very good at combining sales driven initiatives with brand building, and recognizing that at the end of the day, what makes sports great is going to live events. It's weird saying right now, but having you were in Orlando, a game is much better with 18,000 people in it.
Yes,
whether it's the Fieldhouse, Hinkle, Bankers Life, same with Lucas Oil Stadium. 60,000 people is way better than 20,000 they had in there. It's still a great game, still fun to watch, but you don't have those emotions that you do otherwise. And so I loved going to events as a kid. My dad would have gone to his 75th Indianapolis 500 this year if fans were in the building. So I've gone to a lot of events myself. And so that I don't look at selling a ticket as a negative, but I want to do it in a way that's very fan friendly. And that's kind of what I brought together there, and still what I'm doing to this day, and why individually I've had success, but ultimately, the Pacers are a great organization. The Simons are the longest tenured owners in the NBA, and there's a reason for that. They're a family-run business that has great business acumen, and so I just got to benefit from that.
So describe a little bit about, you were talking about, branding. You were bringing together branding as well as ticket sales and digital, right? So
Sure.
describe that process a little bit. Is there a process that you go through when that's not an easy task? Your brand is your brand, and you obviously have to shift your brand a little bit to make it more user driven, I guess. So kind of describe that process a little bit.
Yeah, when you are the VP of marketing for a consumer product, like you can work and adjust that product a lot easier than you can for an NBA team. The Pacers brand was established well before me and will continue way better moving forward without me. That's the beauty of the NBA and the beauty of professional sports. So I was really just jumping on that ship and steering it the best way I could as long as I was there. And I grew up a Pacers fan. I obviously grew up in Indiana. I love the NBA. So sometimes people like me that work in sports, what ends up happening is you find out you don't like the restaurant as much when you have to work in the kitchen and see how the food's made. Fortunately for me, that didn't happen, but it does happen for a lot of people. And so I was able to kind of keep that fandom a little bit that I had. But the one key thing that I think it's important to recognize is when everybody thinks they're the brand manager when they work for the team. When you work at Starbucks and you're the janitor or you are the VP of operations, you're not worried about that logo as much as you are when you work for the Colts, the Pacers, the Speedway, the Indians, the Fever, whatever the case may be. And so that's great that everybody cares. What makes it tough is that everybody cares. So you have a lot more voices in the room because everybody that works with the Pacers are a Pacers fan. Whether it's the vendors that have been there for a while, Peter Dinwiddie that's transitioning out, or somebody that's new, like you, if you're going to work in sports, you're going to be a fan. Otherwise, go work someplace else where you might have a bit more stability. You're not working as many hours and you're probably making a little bit more money.
How do you block out the voices? You get so many of them. How do you know and block out for young people like this that are in here today? They're going to get in a room, and as an executive, you're going to hear voices from owners to board members to players to coaches. How do you filter that as an executive? Because honestly, this is a question for me more than anything.
Sure.
How do you filter all of that attention into doing what, I guess, staying the course of what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. It used to be a lot easier on a sports team side because you had very few people in the room. The business has grown substantially. When I started at the Pacers, Forbes probably said it was worth a couple $100 million. I think recently it said it was over $1 billion, maybe. That's a huge increase, and a lot more people work for teams. And a lot more talented people work for teams, more talented for me. So it's really where it's gotten tough is before you had the ability to make a decision, but not enough people to get it done. And now you have a lot of people to get it done, but it takes longer to make a decision. So the key to that is giving more time. The downside of time in sports is that the game is happening tomorrow night, whether you're aligned or not. The flight's going to take off. So really role clarification and understanding where you fit and where you don't is crucial, first and foremost. Because if you were speaking out of your lane, go right ahead. Sorry.
So more than anything, you're talking about staying in your lane.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, making sure your lane is clean. It's like looking in the mirror first before you look through the window.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now you've transitioned to the Hawks. Now, how is that different? There's a much, I'm going to call it a younger brand than the Pacers, right? Maybe it's about same age, somewhere in that area, but it's endured a few more brand shifts over the years than the Pacers have. Talk about how you maintain that and kind of keep people on the same page with a brand that is I think it's a young and upcoming brand. I don't know. You can probably correct me on that.
Yeah. But the Pacers have the fortunate side of a wider alumni base. And when Donnie Walsh was president, to Larry Bird, to Kevin Pritchard now, great playoff runs. The Hawks haven't had the experience of, year after year of making the playoffs. And when I was talking about products before, like the product on the court is the main reason why people connect with the brand. So it has nothing to do with me. I don't recruit talent. I don't scout. I don't sign free agents. I don't draft. None of that.
And so, you're thrilled about that, right?
Yeah. Well, any team that would want me to do that would be the last team in the league. That's for sure. But
you watch, they'd go like 72-10 and be in the finals.
Wish. That's right. But no, so when you have a young team like the Hawks have in a city that is bigger than Indianapolis, so a lot of similarities, but fairly younger. Indy is more of a family community. Atlanta is more of an up and coming city that's growing downtown, kind of like where Indy was maybe 20 years ago from the growth of downtown. And when you have a young team with Trae Young is an up and coming superstar, great guy. John Collins, like that is very similar to the Reggie Miller teams of the late 80s, the Paul George, Roy Hibbert years of the early 2010s. And with a team that might make the playoffs or make that first round or make that second round, that's a different position and different level of communication when you go out to market than a team like the Milwaukee Bucks were this year. Like, hey, this could be an NBA Finals team, maybe a championship team, or a Lakers team that, hey, if they don't make the finals, it's a failure. And so that really drastically changes who you are as a marketer, because you want to exceed expectations. So if I went out this next year and said, hey, we're going to make the finals and win it, no one's going to believe that. It's aspirational, but it's not believable. If we have a position that shows that we're a team that is going to be fun to watch and has a chance to make the playoffs, that is a more believable, but remains with that aspirational to get on board.
So you mentioned a couple of people early in your I guess you could call it youth. I don't know if you want to call it youth,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
in your young adult age as a college student, what throughout your professional life, you've talked about Quinn Buckner, you've talked about those instructors. Who else has been a solid influence in you and getting you to kind of where you are, I guess, goal oriented, things like that?
Sure. From the Pacers standpoint, it was organization wide. Like the Pacers have an interesting way of being very flat when it comes to who you can talk to. It's not like corporate America where you can't go down the executive wing. When Larry Bird was the president, you would be in the elevator with him. He's walking in just like anybody else. And that's a pretty crazy thing as a kid who grew up in Indiana. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes or in front of the camera that helped me a lot from a Pacers standpoint. I mentioned Quinn. When I started the Pacers, Conrad Runner was somebody who brought me on and really, one of the best in the business, football or basketball or baseball from just a journalist standpoint. Leaving Indy and going to Live Nation, Kurt Schwarzkopf, who works for Ticketmaster Live Nation, is somebody that used to work for the Nuggets, used to work for the LA Kings, has a lot of team experience, and now has that corporate experience, which is different. Coming back to Atlanta, there's people that might not be on the radar of Indy market that really helped me transition smoothly into Atlanta, very much like Rick and Jim did when I was at the Pacers. So Peter Dinwiddie is somebody else that I mentioned that is going to the Sixers, but when I was there, he was in the basketball front office and he helped really connect. Karen Atkinson's still there right now with the Pacers, somebody that runs player relations and does a great job. Is a peer of mine there, but helped me out a lot. And then even people that are still there that might have reported to me, Celeste Ballou that runs Pacers social and digital, like she helped me a lot. She reported to me, but somebody that's just great on your team that you can depend on. And so to this day, I've kept those relationships. She reports to the person that I reported to when I was there, Todd Taylor, for those last few years. He and I have stayed in touch. And that's the tough part when you leave an organization, is making sure you maintain the relationships that you establish, because it's like high school friends or college friends. You intend on staying in touch with them, but it's effort. And luckily, I've been able to do that.
How easy has it been for you to maintain those relationships? Has there been difficulty in that, or has it been a breeze?
Yeah, pre-COVID, it wasn't that tough because, like when the Hawks went to Indy, I came back for the game. It's an 8-hour drive, and you see everybody there because everybody's still working those events. It was probably tougher at first when people would leave because when social media first started picking up, LinkedIn is where you had business relationships and you didn't really become Facebook friends or whatever it was at the time. Now that's blended so much that line between personal and professional is so blurry, right? So that makes it easier to stay in touch and also makes it easier to get in trouble if you don't maintain your social presence very well. But tech, you get cell phones, you text, you stay in touch, people send Christmas cards, that sort of thing, and it makes it pretty easy.
So technology and social media have made it easier to accomplish. So students take note on that one because,
Sure.
social, like he said, the personal and the business have blended a little bit. And so that leads me into a follow-up with that. Do you differentiate? Do you try to maintain that personal brand, professional brand before personal brand, or does it inevitably bleed into one another?
Yeah, it inevitably does in sports. even if you try to, because you work so many hours.
Yeah, that
It's
makes perfect sense.
It's really tough when you're, like you mentioned Chris Denary earlier, and Chris and I worked together at the Pacers. I would see him at Butler, and we worked together in Indianapolis Speedway. So, and he knew my brother who worked at the Speedway too. So like, I could not have that blend. But you work so many hours, you might work the month of May 15 hours a day with somebody. And so you'd have to be really good to not show your personal side and only show that professional side. And really, like, if you're gonna work in sports too, that's kind of the fun part. It's as close as you get to like the teammates you had on your little league teams. Like even if you have different titles, you are in it together, and there's talent that goes up and down the hierarchy chart, because sometimes people get promoted because of benefit. I got promoted a couple of times early on at the Pacers because everyone was leaving, because we had some tough years that year. People were going to better jobs, different jobs, less stressful jobs. Well, I was up and coming from an age standpoint. I didn't care about that stress as much. I don't know if I could have maintained that if I would be doing it today.
So do you have those, I guess, those close, have any of those relationships that have kind of blurred that line become the close ones, that maybe they're a good friend or a really great friend now? Or
Yeah. So one person I work closely with at the Pacers, he moved to XFL. Was Derek Thronberg. He and I we didn't know each other until he started. He worked with St. Louis Cardinals. Got very close, because you literally when you work playoff games, those gold swagger eras of the Pacers, like, it was 20-hour days. I mean, it was eight years ago today, October 21st, at the Fever won the WNBA championship. We worked 8 a.m. till 5 a.m. that day. Justin Hunt, who I worked with at the Pacers for a little bit, he once joked he worked a 36-hour day, and he did. Like, he literally didn't leave the field house for 36 hours.
holy cow.
And so, like, when you work that much time there, you're showering there, you are eating your breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. It's impossible not. You either hate each other or love each other, basically, when it comes down to it.
So do you live by that mantra of sports is you got to be in it for, you're going to be low pay, long hours, and no credit?
The low pay, like when I entered the Pacers, it was a $0 an hour internship. And to their credit, they started paying interns really before many interns in sports needed to. And many people like me would have continued to work for free. So no, I don't. I try to carry the flag of getting people to make money, even though I did not. I didn't understand just because you were screwed over and you hated it then why you would pay that forward. So certainly the Pacers changed that, and really you don't see that as much as much as you used to. The pay will never be as competitive as that same job in corporate America. But the truth is, it would be tough for me to be the VP of marketing for Coca-Cola. That's such a higher skilled job than what I have. That job probably, I don't know, 3x, 5x of what I make, probably more. But they also would struggle to get into the roles that we're in, because it is a tough job. Kevin Pritchard once said in an interview, he works 24/7, because even when he's out of the office, when he's in the shower, when he's at the dinner table, he's thinking about the sport. And that's true. And so at the end of the day, it is a lifestyle job. And if you're unwilling to accept that, you probably aren't going to be successful. It doesn't mean you don't establish boundaries, and it doesn't mean you don't have expectations on pay. But at the end of the day, even if you make good money, the hourly rate, when you take your gross income divided by your hours at the end of the year, it's grossly low, even if you make a good salary.
So what is it about that role in corporate America that you say maybe you may not have that skill set for? What is it about that?
So, I mean, corporate America, at the end of the day, most NBA team owners, they bought the team not for day-to-day profit. They don't want to lose money. They want to make sure the value of the franchise continues to go up. That has a lot to do with both local marketing and league-related marketing. But at the end of the day, they bought it because, in Herb and Mel's case, they wanted to save it for Indiana. They wanted the Pacers to remain in the city of Indianapolis and not leave to another state. And they had Simon Malls, and they had personal and professional investments in that state from family and from corporate America. So they didn't buy it to have it be a big profit seeker. They lost a lot of money many, many years for that. And then that's all reported. That's not me reporting that. So at the end of the day, my job there, some years I might be doing things that are better for long-term or helping the basketball related portion of the business, where at Coke, they don't have to care about the can of Coke. The product is not human. Paul George, Roy Hibbert, George Hill, all those guys are human, and that's different. So, we might not post something to Twitter or Instagram because it's a person you're talking about versus a product. Also, marketing isn't the same across companies. So what it meant for the Pacers isn't exactly what it means for the Hawks, and certainly isn't the same for a corporate product like Coca-Cola. And so could I go in there and do it? I'm sure I could. But at the end of the day, it's a different skill set that I would not take for granted. And I can't hear you, Jeffrey.
That makes perfect sense. I just wanted to see what, you said that it was much different, and I'm sitting there like, how, what, let them understand what the difference might be, because there is some differences there. Obviously you're a service versus a product, which you will learn at some point, whether it be a marketing class or a strategy class. You will learn the product versus service are much different. But you didn't out and out say it, but the highest, I guess, impact thing is hospitality in sport. Talk a little bit about, your role in marketing is not just getting the brand out there, but also ensuring that the people are taken care of and have a good experience. Talk a little bit about how you impact that role and how students can learn what it means to be good customer service, good hospitality.
Sure. When you look at I'll use the field house. When you look at the lower level of the of Bankers Life Fieldhouse for a Pacers game, especially a playoff game, you'll see it packed, and those are primarily full season tickets. But somebody doesn't wake up one day and say, who didn't go to one game last year, say, I'm going to go to 41 games this year. And so I mentioned Todd Taylor earlier. Todd is the SVP of Sales and Marketing for the Pacers, and he really believes in the dating analogy, and it's something I've stolen, which is like, look, you can get married overnight, just like you can buy a full season ticket overnight, but you probably won't be that successful with that marriage. Meaning, from a sports standpoint, that following year, you're probably like, man, that was too much. There was a lot of time and there was a lot of money. And so what hospitality does is that each year, before you know it, you went to one game last year, 3 the next year, 10 the following year, and now you're sitting lower level, and you tiptoed your way to marriage versus waking up with a ring on your finger. And that mentality has a service-oriented mentality. So what I love about the Fieldhouse, and Mel Raines on the arena side has done a great job at it, of continuing it, is like when you go in there, they're really hospitable from the moment your ticket is scanned till you leave. The parking lot, security, everyone has an expectation like Disney does. Doesn't matter what your role is. And if you aren't going to have a smile on your face, you probably won't be out there working, even if you're behind the scenes. And so that hospitality matters so much, because if anybody has a bad experience now, they can tell hundreds of people instantly, if not tens of thousands, depending on what their following count is. Whereas before, it was just a letter and you could take care of it.
Yeah, that's where social's reach comes in, is when you are not hospitable with people. Those that have done Erica's social media command center at IMS understand. Erica Shonkwiler is one of our instructors, and she mans the social media control center over there at the IMS during race day. And they get bombarded with questions. Let's just put it that way. And well, I sat in one time, and there's insults that go with it, but you know how that goes. So I'm a little disappointed in our crowd here. The fact that I only have 3 questions, right? There should be questions being dropped in here like crazy. So Kyle, I'm going to let you take over while the rest of them start to think of questions to drop to Rob, because he's got a lot of information here, and I know he wants to divulge it.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks for being here today.
Sure.
So there's kind of 2 questions. Well, there's one question being asked, and then I have a question that kind of flows with it. But we'll ask the first one. Do you find it easier to market an overall team like the 2014-2015 Hawks, or a young star team like they are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think both have their pros and cons. That I wasn't with the Hawks in 14-15. In fact, I was working for the Pacers and had a kind of the Pacers Hawks met in the playoffs that year. When you have a great team like that, and I'll use a similar team of David West, George Hill, Paul George, Roy Hibbert, Lance Stevenson, like you have personalities, but when you have a core team like that, that's going to the Eastern Conference Finals, that's way better than an up-and-coming team, because you're already where the up-and-coming team wants to be. You only have so many opportunities in your life to work with a star on the level of Trae Young. Trae's going his 3rd year, but I've kind of called him the NBA's first Gen Z star, where like he can post anything on Instagram or TikTok and it does well, even if you don't think it will. And that's just something you have to trust in that from a marketing standpoint. But he's a great basketball player. Ultimately, Trey wants to win. He's on record for that. So in a few years, when Trey is on a team like that 14-15 team, if we're fortunate enough to see that happen, that's going to be way better than Trey now, because he's going to have people around him too. The good news is he has some of that. John Collins is a great big. Cam Reddish and Dre Hunter had a solid rookie year last year. And it reminds me of some of those teams in the late aughts of the Pacers that they weren't winning as much yet, but they had solid players on the court. When Paul came in, he was kind of that Trey Young, could be a superstar type guy. But ultimately, to answer the question, the 14-15 team, I'd certainly rather look for, just because you know you're going to do a playoff run, and that there's nothing like NBA playoffs.
And then my question that kind of goes with it, obviously State Farm Arena was finished renovated in 2018, and that was the same year Trey Young got drafted. So
yeah,
you had to obviously, was it easy to market both to get fans into the arena that year? Obviously you had a renovated stadium and
I got to benefit from the renovation. I arrived October 1st. The building opened October 20th. It was 2 years ago yesterday that it opened for our open house. And so it's a wonderful building. Like it's fantastic. So that to have a complete renovation, it was a couple $100 million renovation. If you remember, the field house when it opened in Indy was 183 million, if I remember correctly. So like different present value analysis there, but still more money was spent than that field house. So I got to walk into a building that people were really excited to get into, because the building prior to that renovation was not a very inviting building. One thing that the field house did was really showed how an open environment with just open concourses and easy connectivity from side to side helps sell the experience a bit more than one that's very segmented. And so State Farm Arena is most certainly that. Having a rookie come in with a little excitement that played well and had some big games, especially towards the end of the year, certainly made it easier. But I think that building can sell itself with any team when it opens like that. So I was very fortunate.
Great. One of our students asked, have you seen a benefit in marketing / sales wise from lowering the concession prices in Atlanta? And do you think every sports team should follow? I think the Falcons do it as well.
Yeah. Look, I think that when I was a kid, my favorite place to go to dinner was a place that had unlimited refills on Coca-Cola. It was like, it didn't matter where. Like, so I thought that was really cool that they made the decision before I started that any fan that bought a Coke at the building could refill at any of the stations without having to wait in line. I thought that was really cool. I think that plays more into like it's a great PR story. It's certainly something that people like when they're there, but I think that plays more into like renewing your tickets than it does selling. Because if you were making a decision on food, we have great food at the building, but that's just a part of the experience. If you're just looking to go to dinner, you probably wouldn't spend the money you would have to spend on the ticket to then just have the option to eat that food. So it plays more into your overall experience than anything else.
So do you think like that unlimited refill with Coca-Cola kind of played in that Coca-Cola is obviously headquartered in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, like that is, it's kind of like IndyCar. Like growing up, if you weren't open wheel racing, you weren't Indiana. If you're not Coca-Cola in Atlanta, you're not going to make it very well. So if you go into a restaurant and ask for a Pepsi or ask for a 7-Up, they don't really know what you're talking about if it's not a Coca-Cola product. And that's kind of a cool thing. It is the local drink that's an international brand.
So the next few questions are kind of looking back at Indianapolis, but also comparing it to Atlanta. So sure. One of our attendees said, what are the struggles that come along with marketing in a smaller market like Indianapolis?
The tough part for a city like Indianapolis is that the corporate base isn't so big. And so when you don't have a lot of local corporations, they're the ones investing in the most expensive seats. They're the ones getting the suites. And so at the end of the day, the local corporate base is very supportive of all this professional sports there. But when you have the Colts, Pacers, Speedway, and all those options, you only need so many seats for so many events for client entertainment. So the nice part about Atlanta is it has a wider corporate base. And so those local dollars are there a bit more.
Those young people in the crowd, you're going to get that in your sport finance class, corporate base.
So then how do you measure your success in marketing? For example, sales have money or a number of sales as a goal. Would marketing be social followers, amount of sponsors, etc.?
The at the end of the day, what's nice about whether I was at with the Pacers at the Hawks, like we had quantified goals for number of tickets sold, the revenue associated with that, merchandise across the board. And if you just think of a single game ticket, it's like anything else from an e-commerce standpoint. There's going to be a lot of people that consider it, and then a classic conversion funnel. So you can quantify the web traffic you need to any Ticketmaster purchase page. And as long as you hit that web traffic, then you're going to hit your sales number for that game. But if you don't hit that traffic, you're not going to have enough people that it's in their consideration set to end up purchasing. So you have major goals on top, and then you have kind of these micro non-revenue goals that allow people on a digital side or a marketing side to kind of have a goal to go after that makes sense to them.
And previously, you mentioned that marketing is moving to digital. Where do you see marketing going in like the future?
Yeah. So when I said that was like literally, when I mentioned Conrad Brunner, and he started Pacers.com in the year 2000, which is crazy to say out loud that there wasn't really a website before that. There was, but not to the level that he brought it. He and I worked together from a web email standpoint to make digital really a function of the Pacers back in 04, 05, 06 when I first started get there. Now anybody knows that's kind of standard operating procedures, more the details in which you take it. I don't know where it's going anymore. 5 to 10 years from now, it's kind of a weird thing to say in the world we're in right now. I assume we'll get back at some point to having a big part of people being in the building. But when you start to think about where, not just where data is, but also where data is going, how you can get micro sales opportunities in front of people. So if you League Pass right now, for the most part, is a product you get across the nation. But if you just want to watch one NBA game on your app, or you just want to watch one quarter, I think you might start to see that opportunity a little bit more. That'll be an interesting negotiation. I don't have any intel on that, but I do see like where and how people watch the game evolving drastically, not just because of cord cutters, but also because of that.
So how has it changed, obviously throughout COVID?
Sure.
I'm sure you're working remotely, so you're not at your office.
Yeah, correct. So really, our big revenue stream stopped, right? We no longer had game broadcasts. We were still selling merchandise, but our store in the building was no longer open. So our currency effectively was content. And it's not that we were making money off it as much as that's how we remained engaged with fans. And so first and foremost, when March 11th hit, we were focused on the community and communication of our games at large. But once we got past that, quickly moved to kind of sources of distraction of content, and then to where we are now. It's been 6 or 7 months, right? But at this time, everybody in marketing is primarily focused on that. The one caveat, we were the first NBA team that announced our arena as a voting precinct. So this month has been heavy for us. We started that in July and continued through August. So really every day now, people aren't going into their office, but we have 100 to 200 people going to State Farm Arena every day to help with that voting precinct.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of the NBA followed after that with the voting, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Tony Wrestler and the ownership group for the Hawks really wanted that to be a thing that we attempted to do. Steve Coonan, our CEO, made it happen in coordination with a lot of people. And so it's a lot to put on. And, it's weird to walk into the building where you're used to seeing a basketball court and there's over 300 voting stations. And where everyone on my staff, everybody I worked with before was like, hey, make sure you have your phone ready in case you capture something. Now you're not allowed to have your phone out because it's a voting precinct and it's against the law. So, it's a completely different role and responsibility, but has been a huge benefit in the world we live in.
Completely different setting for you guys. But what does your typical day of work look like? Obviously, COVID has changed that, but what did it look like before COVID?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when you work for a team, especially in marketing, you are an international brand, but you are a local marketing organization because anything national TV broadcast wise is handled by the NBA. So our marketing radius is on that 150 miles of Atlanta, and that's true for Indianapolis as well for the Pacers. And so what we're trying to do is get people that aren't fans to become fans, and get people that are fans to become bigger fans. And that's primarily through attending games, but it's also through watching on Fox Sports, by buying merchandise, all those types of ancillary sides. But ultimately, to get a ticket to come to a game is what we're hoping to do, and to build fans through that game experience.
So I never really thought about this, but one of our students asked, does the NBA have certain rules or regulations on what you can do in marketing? And are there any things that you aren't allowed to do that may surprise people?
Yeah. So, the joke that you'll hear is, the NBA stands for nothing but attorneys when you start with a marketing team. But it's a good thing because, you have a collective bargaining agreement, you have franchises that are worth a lot of money. You want to make sure that people are operating soundly. And so that's the first thing that was handed to me when I started at the Pacers, and I read that manual. I take it for granted now, but there's updates regularly. The nice thing about that 150-mile radius thing that I said, that's actually a rule by the NBA. And if the Pacers didn't have that in the 90s, all Chicago fans, or I'm sorry, all people in Indiana probably would have been Bulls fans because of it. Because the Bulls could have put billboards of Michael Jordan in downtown Indy if they wanted. But because of those restrictions, they allowed the Pacers to kind of protect that bubble a little bit. And a guy like Michael Jordan, that could happen with LeBron in Cleveland. That like when he was there, if you didn't have those restrictions and kind of protective territories, from a marketing to fans, you wouldn't be able to necessarily own that voice. But then when you are working with corporate brands to say, hey, look, we have an area of the country that we can focus on and no one else in the NBA can, that's valuable to corporations from a communication standpoint.
So you mentioned the 100-mile radius. So how does that work with two teams in the same city, or kind of in the same city with
you have that in LA, obviously. There's some on the East Coast that are close there too. There's some amendments there, and it can get a little tricky. Sometimes you see people on different turf that maybe they shouldn't be on, but in general, if you look at a map, you're able to protect that fairly well across most of the teams.
So as one of the teams who did not travel to the NBA bubble, what are some strategies that the Hawks used to stay relevant as the NBA was coming back from its hiatus?
Yeah, that was an interesting time because we're part of those 8 teams that didn't go. We pivoted quickly to the voting precinct elements, like saying, look, we needed to use our arena the best we can. We also had a lot of events like the Fieldhouse does that at first what we had to do was communicate what was happening with those events. So that allowed us to focus on that, where people in Indy that have those same jobs, they had to determine who would do that. But really, like I said, we became much more focused on social. We were already there, but we realized that we really needed to be better there. But first and foremost, the nice thing that happened from our organization is that from top down, ownership down, it was like, look, we care first and foremost about being like really focused on Atlanta. And the Pacers are good at that from a community standpoint. The Hawks are really good at that as well. And so we worked with a few local organizations as well as State Farm to set up food banks that you wouldn't see anywhere outside of that Atlanta bubble, no pun intended, but that were just for the purpose of making sure our community was holding up during a really tough time. And we've maintained elements like that. And so if we were in the bubble, it would have been a little bit tougher to do that. We also worked with a few teams that weren't in the bubble, the Warriors being one, and we established a voters win campaign. If you go to hawks.com/vote, we were competing against the Warriors to see who could get more fans to text in. We actually won that. And so we created the John Lewis Good Trouble Award trophy. And so we will be the recipients of that trophy. It's actually a physical trophy. But we develop campaigns like that to be a voice in not only the local market, but internationally with what we're able to push.
That's awesome. So you kind of pushed your focus of the marketing more on the city of Atlanta rather than, I mean, you still tied in the Hawks, but
yeah,
focus more on the city during times when
it was weird because, your objectives were no longer like, well, motivate them to attend a game or an event, get them to buy merchandise, get them to download the app. It was very genuine. It was like and we always had those elements, but like we were only focused on it, whereas before that was a part of our focus. And it was a time that it was really needed and something that we've maintained.
So what aspect of marketing are you most passionate about and why?
The reason I love sports, the best thing is when it's a sold out venue for a big event. It was very strange to see an empty Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but when you have a small thing to do with having, in that case, several 100,000 people in a room, in a stadium, a Colts playoff game. I never worked for the Colts, but going to those events when you have something to do with that, it's very really the best thing that I've described before. Being there 8 years ago for that Indiana Fever Championship, that was really cool. I got a championship ring from it. I didn't play at all, obviously. I had nothing to do with the team winning, but it was just cool to be a smart part about it, and it's very addicting.
So how differently does the Pacers front office and ownership run in comparison to the Hawks? Because obviously there's different ways to run businesses and different owners.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The Pacers are really one of the last teams that have one owner. Simon family obviously is very involved, but Herb Simon is the owner of the team. The primary owner of the Hawks, Tony Ressler and Jamie Gertz, they're fantastic. They're very similar to the Simon family. Like, they like to stay behind the scenes, very strong business acumen, very supportive of their staff. Just like the Simons, like, want to be a part of the community and make sure they are. It's not just fluff. But we do have a group of minority owners also, and so that can change too, because you have just different voices in the room as well. Atlanta is different than Indianapolis, and so a lot of the changes aren't like owner driven necessarily as much as market opportunity, and then capitalizing or adjusting because of it.
So we have two questions that kind of flow with your position in marketing. And the first one is, do you think you will stay in Atlanta for the long haul, or do you think you could end up moving again? For example, if it is a really good job presented itself somewhere, but is not necessarily marketing, how would you approach deciding if you wanted to do it?
Yeah, I never necessarily pictured leaving the Pacers. I've been there 10 years, which for some is a long time. There's people that work there 40 years, so I feel I left sometimes feeling still like a rookie. I love Atlanta. I could see living here for a very long time. It's a community that's accepted me. It made great friends here. I've been given great opportunity. So I'm not one that's like looking to bounce around. But if somebody contacted me, was that your dog?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right, man.
He's barking.
And it's great. But if an opportunity comes around, sure. You can't say no to a job that wasn't offered to you. But right now, I'm happy here and love the idea of growing with this team.
Sorry about that interruption.
It's all good, man. That's funny.
If you weren't in marketing, what other career would you want to work in? Would you still want to be involved in sports, or is there another industry that interested you while you were in college?
Yeah, I mean, I always had an interest in sports, and I always had an interest in marketing too. I think the tough part is you like I am at that stage in my career where I could still go down another path, and with Ticketmaster and Live Nation when I worked there, certainly did. But you also build up experience, and people build up expectations of who you are or what you're looking for. And so there's plenty of things I'm interested in. I don't know if I could do those jobs. And I'm also don't know if I'm willing to go make less money for a period of time to then get to that level. Right. So that's the tough part when you establish yourself. And I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. Like, I really like my job. There's things that I'd love to do outside of it, but I'm super happy. And I assume I'll be in some element of marketing or working for a sports team for a long time.
Awesome. So you obviously grew up as a Pacers fan just from living in Indianapolis. So how did that help you or push you to get a job with the Pacers after knowing that you wanted to work in sports?
Yeah, I mean that was my primary focus when I went to grad school. I got lucky because that was really not just my primary, my only focus, frankly. And so when I got an internship, even though it was $0, I was really happy with that. The reason I wanted to work for the Pacers because that was my favorite sport, basketball, and that was my favorite team. I would have loved to work for any team. I would have moved out of the state to get into the industry, that type of guy at the time. But I was dying to work for that team. I mean, Reggie was drafted in '87. I was 6 years old when he was drafted, and so I grew with that era of the team. So those 18 years that he was there, I saw them go to the NBA Finals, Eastern Conference Finals many years, different coaches, Larry Brown, Larry Bird, Bo Hill, that sort of thing. But ultimately, Donnie Walsh was somebody that I would hear speak at events like this. They weren't Zoom, but where students were invited to. And I really admired who he was as a leader in an organization. And I wanted to work for a company that he was at. That was where I was as a kid. And so I fortunately got to do that. Most people don't get that opportunity. And I fell into that. But I couldn't have seen it any other way. If I could go back to that and give myself advice, certainly I would widen my perspective a bit. The one area that people, you kind of don't know what you don't know. The team side's great. Team side can be brutal too if you're not lucky. I had a great opportunity. A lot of people didn't. I don't mean the Pacers, just in general on a team side of a business. If you want to work in marketing, the marketing agency that the team hires tends to do more like traditional advertising, traditional promotion, traditional marketing than the employees on the team. And that's kind of a funky thing to say, but if you want to help build the theme and the brand and the look, a lot of teams are lean. And so they have to depend on agencies. And so I worked with a lot of local agencies when I was at the Pacers. So if you would have worked for the Pacers, you would have had a different name on your LinkedIn.
Awesome. So we have one question left, and then we have 3 advice questions. So one question involving more of the sports, and then 3 advice questions. So what are your worries if you are unable to have any fans in the stadium, and how will you adapt to that situation?
With no fans in the stadium, how would we adapt?
Yeah, because I mean, obviously you don't know if there's going to be fans at the start of the NBA season.
Yeah, so I've been careful not to speculate on that, and it's not because of a PR standpoint. It's because like those scenarios can just fog your mind, and like blood can go over your eyes when you're considering them. And where my experience lies in that, when the lockout was potentially going to happen in 2011 for the NBA, and it did happen, it's very similar. We might play 0 games. We might have a lockout where we played 0. I didn't think that would happen, but it's possible. We might play 82. We might play 60. It was Thanksgiving weekend when I found out we were going to start Christmas Day. And so you have to be prepared for anything to happen, but we developed a couple scenarios there. If there's no fans in the building, a lot of the marketing that we would do would have to be drastically changed. And so ultimately the NBA business model needs some fans in the building to be successful. And so I'm planning as though there will be a small percentage of at a minimum, but it'll no matter what, the NBA is also held by state government and federal government. So if one state, California, doesn't allow anybody to come in, but another state, Georgia, does, how will we handle that as a league? I don't know. If one state doesn't allow so if one country, Canada, doesn't allow anybody from America in, how will they handle that? So those are things that will have to be figured out that I'll have no input in. And if I start doing scenario building in, my eyes will explode. So I am preparing as though we'll have a season at some point and that we'll have to get some fans in there. And the way we're preparing for that is, hey, we need to make sure it's a safe and healthy and fun experience. Not just safe, not just healthy, but also fun. So that's where we're focusing on. When that will happen, we don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know if they have a set date yet or any plan for next season. So on to the advice questions.
Sure.
What piece of advice could you give a young college student trying to find their own way into the sports field?
Yeah, it's that gets tougher to answer the older you get because it becomes less real at the distance I've grown from there. even though I can still relate to it. And I still distinctly remember. I think you got to be careful downplaying small opportunities. Because that paper example I gave, that's true. That's all I did. I ran a piece of paper, and it's stupid. Like, why would you ever do that? But my objective there wasn't to be the best paper runner, though certainly I had to make sure I did a great job there, or I would have been fired or yelled at minimum. It was to put on the best I can to be around people that might notice, and to put myself in situations to get lucky. So that doesn't mean you take on everyone. It just, I loved racing. I had a family that had a long history of racing, and I got an opportunity there. When I got to volunteer through the sports corps, sometimes, or when I told the stories about Memorial Stadium and working the parking lot, like most days were nothing. Some days John Mellencamp came by, so when John Mellencamp was there were more executives around at that time. So I had to pretend like every day John could be there, because then I might get to talk to somebody that is a decision maker. I think the other part to it as well is you got to realize what wins are. So a lot of times people will reach out to the CEO. CEO is very powerful, can certainly hire you if he or she wants to. But really, like the senior coordinator, manager, director level person won't have as sexy of a title, and even VP. But if you get fortunate enough to connect with them and have a conversation with them, and you get hired underneath them or around them or in the industry by them, 5 years from now, they'll be the managers, directors, VPs, and SVPs, and can help pull you into those spots. So if you look at Frank Vogel and the staff he has there, some of those guys were video coordinators for the Pacers. If you look at the Celtics crew, some of the guys on that coaching staff never dreamed they'd be coaching with one of the best franchises in the world ever. But they hitched their wagon to somebody that was really special, and it paid off for them. And so you don't know where that opportunity will go. You just got to make those strategic choices, and you got to put yourself in a spot to do it. One last thing on that. Michael Grady said something great once. Michael Grady works for the Nets now. Great sports personality in Indy for many years. But he said, I remember him saying, you got to find reasons to say yes. That doesn't mean you always say yes. You definitely need boundaries, but if you find reasons to say yes more than find reasons to say no when you're given opportunity.
Dr. Sherman, I see a little smirk up there from you.
Yes.
Only preaches that to us just a little bit.
That's great.
No, that was great advice. And the next question is, what is the best advice you can give when it comes to reaching out to people? Like, how would you go about connecting with people in this day and age?
Yeah, I mean, the dating analogy that I used, that Todd Taylor mentioned for that season tickets and get married overnight, just like you get season tickets overnight. But if you want a successful marriage, you probably should put a little more effort into it. It's if you look, the awkwardness that some people put into their message to me in LinkedIn, and they write forever and they feel so guilty writing me. And like, I can't read it all, but when I do, it's like, man, they let anxiety get the best of them there before sending it. I can relate to that. Anxiety is a tough thing. But if you were asking somebody out on a date with that same mentality, they wouldn't respond, whether it's traditional at a bar or through a dating app. And so you got to think of yourself as like, all right, I'm a human brand. So if I'm going to reach out and somebody says no to me, great. It's the 99 slap rule. You might get slapped 99 times before you get the yes for the date, but you're going to have to put yourself in position to do that. But each of those 99 times, you got to iterate and improve. And I don't know how many times in those iterations I accidentally get called a different name because they copied and pasted it. What they sent to Kyle, they sent to Rob. And those little things, it's like, dude, why would I take time if you can't even get that right? One, and two, a more important thing is like just minor research will change that first question you ask. And then the craziest thing is that they never expect me to respond, so they're not prepared. And so you got to think, what's that next step once they say yes to the date? All right, you haven't even expected that. And so that preparation of lining that up of a three-phase process, you need a marketing plan for yourself, just like you would need it if you got the job that you're hoping to get when you talk to me. And so if you do that, great. If you don't, it's going to show. And so the last thing I'd say is most people don't follow up. So don't assume that I'm going to get 16 responses. I'll probably get one LinkedIn message.
So do you suggest like email or LinkedIn? Like, what do you think is the best way to communicate with somebody?
So certainly those are easy ones. It's what you could bring to the table is like, all right, what is a unique way that I'm comfortable with and or they're comfortable with? So where email has changed, for if you're going to an executive, like well above me, they probably have somebody filtering their emails, but they probably don't have somebody filtering their Instagram DMs. So if you go through Instagram, there's a risk. How does your Instagram look? What's your bio say? What's your profile picture? Right? But that IGDM might pop up on their phone. They won't see your email potentially. LinkedIn is kind of a blur there, whether or not their admin would stop that or not, if you're going to a high-end executive. So you got to think to yourself, where can I hit them that they will respond to? So early on with Mark Cuban, he was very active on Twitter. There'd be plenty of people that would DM him and get DMs back from Mark Cuban. And so when was the right time to do it? Right when he posted. So then you knew he had his phone in his hand because he's probably on an elliptical like Mark used to always do. So you would have to find those moments of like, all right, when for the really high quality people. You don't want to do that every time you're trying to reach out to somebody like me, but if you're trying to get in front of somebody huge like Cuban, you got to really think about the right time to do it. You'll hear executives do interviews, and if some of them, if they're like John Gruden, say, "Oh, I wake up every morning at 4:15," well, send them an email at 4:15 a.m. and be ready for a response. So you're tailoring your marketing to your consumer. In this case, it's the person you're reaching out to. So you can have mass marketing efforts; they won't work unless you have hundreds of them, and you might get one. And you can have very direct, well thought out. Darren Ravel can be hit or miss by people, but he is very good and was very good at a young age at getting in front of people in unique ways. One way he would do it, he was trying to, there's a story he would tell about Malcolm Gladwell, and he put a subject line of pumpkin infused Twinkie as a subject line, just to stick out in the thread. So like, it better fits your personality, and that fits Darren's personality. But in general, you'll hear about stories that somebody, like I've had like pizzas delivered to the office from somebody, like stuff like that. If you do it well, I would have a note on there. It works, but if it's awkward or poorly done, it doesn't work. So you got to decide what your personal brand wants to be in that case, and then adjust accordingly. But broadly speaking, certainly LinkedIn can be good. Email if you can find it. Chris Granger, who is he was the president of the Sacramento Kings up in Detroit now. The way he got the job at the NBA, there's early days of email. He guessed David Stern's email. He did D Stern. He did David Stern. He did David. He did every one of them. That's why when Larry Bird started the Pacers, it was not L Bird. It wasn't Larry Bird. It was another email address, because otherwise he'd get so many emails. But you have to kind of find a way to get to somebody in a way that you know that they have a higher likelihood of opening it. That's a long-winded way of saying it, but of just saying put some more thought into it than just sending a stupid LinkedIn message. LinkedIn can work, but you got to put thought into what your message is, not just where your message is.
Oh, Rob, you may have just opened a can of worms from some of these students.
I'm happy to talk about that. I really
am. Pizza.
Yeah.
Don't forget to send pizza.
Sitting at his desk one day and a box of pizza shows up. He's probably like, "Where's this from?"
Yeah, if you know somebody really likes something and you hear that in an interview, and you get that in front of them, like that shows that you care. And so, that is any good gift, birthday gift, you put thought into it. It probably is gonna land a little bit better. So just put a little thought in there and strategize your thought. Like the Taylor Rooks, who works for Bleacher Report, when she was at Illinois, she went to 100 different markets because she wanted to be on TV, and she found the 4 stations in those top 100 markets. And before she reached out to any of them, she had the name, the email address, the phone number of 4 people in every market, and went to 400 people and got like 4 responses. And now she's one of the best. but like that, she had a plan before she started saying, hey, mister, can you help me here? I really want to do that. And so you just need a plan. Any plan could work, but no plan probably won't work.
All righty. And our last question, Dr. Sherman knows this question's coming because it's asked every single week.
All right.
What advice would you give to a recent graduate who is trying to find a full-time job during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I don't think it's too much off of what it was before. You know, like most people say they would, like, and I've made this mistake too. Let's look at the Pacers. Hey, I'll do anything to work for the Pacers. Will you clean toilets? It's like, I don't think I would clean toilets. Well, that is one job. Can you clean toilets? It's like, no, I'm not very good at cleaning toilets either. So there's an interest and there's a skill. And so, you know, you don't have as much opportunity. There's not as many jobs being posted, but the NBA has a job right now. It's growth marketing manager. Focus a lot on League Pass, and it's posted right now if you Google it. Well, that's a great job. And so that's a job that wouldn't have probably have been there a few years ago because there is a lot of growth opportunity with League Pass. All right, so what skills do you have? You have the interest in working for the NBA? Great. Can you do that job? Maybe. You have to be able to explain how you can do that job. And so, Kyle, that's where I would focus. You know, networking, obviously you hear a lot of, and that's recommended, that those things help. But when you find that job, being able to apply how you think you could do that job first and foremost. So then when you reach out to that network to get to them, you have somebody that can say, yeah, I know Rob can do that because they did that here. And then here's how they can do that job versus being like, oh, they would love to work for you.
Awesome advice and awesome answers to the questions. Now I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Sherman to finish us off.
I always have one thing that I ask of the guests, Rob, and that's a parting shot, right? What is your big parting shot, piece of advice, whatever it may be from you personally that says, this is what you got to do. This is the last, I guess, your last word. I need to market this somehow and call it the last word or something.
Well, it reminds me of sports reporters from ESPN with Dick Schaap and that crew, right? Yeah. Look, I kind of just said what I would have said there to Kyle. When people reach out and say, man, I just have always loved sports. I played sports, or I did this, or I did that. And I've always wanted to be in sports. Like, you'd be crazy to want to work in sports if you didn't like it. And so certainly get across that passion, but like reverse it. Lead with how you can do that job versus leading with how much you would love to do that job. Because everyone, show the passion, show that passion, but show why you know you can do it. And like I said earlier, don't downplay the small things you've done that match or can be connected to that opportunity. And so that paper runner opportunity, I never used the word paper runner. I still called it pit reporter. I wasn't reporting a damn thing, but I could find other ways to communicate what I did there. So first and foremost, make sure you show them, make sure you explain to them how you can do that. I know there's a lot of steps to get to that point. Applying online, harassing people if they got it, hoping they read not just your cover letter that you submitted, but the forms you had to fill out and the resume you had to attach. All that's bullshit. It's horrible. But once you get past that, if you can't explain to them how you can do that job, you won't get the job anyway.
That's the whammy that I wanted right there.
I almost made it all the way without cussing, but I did.
It's all good on that one. The reason why is because you're telling us that parting shot, and that's what I wanted to hear. I appreciate it. I love it. Well, thank you, Rob, for coming in. We appreciate you coming on tonight. All of the guests, thank you for coming. For you attendees, thanks for coming and asking your questions. We'll continue the series next week when we have Reese Oliver and Joan Malcheski come on from the Green Bay Packers. They'll be on here next Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, same time, same bat channel. Right. We'll be here. There's registration link is up. Kyle and his team will be putting that out to everybody. We really want to get a good turnout for that. They're giving a lot of time. Rob gave his time tonight, and we really appreciate it. So again, next week, the 28th, 6 o'clock, Reese Oliver, Joe Nalcheski, Green Bay Packers. Thanks for attending here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.